This is Alex, and welcome to Barely Braided, where we're taking a deep dive into foster care, adoption, and all things parenting, even the sticky stuff. Welcome to episode 17, and for the very first time today, I have the extreme pleasure of introducing guests that do not live within the United States. So with this being the case, I got a little bit curious if we do have listeners in many other countries, and I was able to find some statistics here, and other than the United States, the top 7 countries our listeners are currently listening from are, in this order, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Ireland, and Spain. And I was just so excited to hear that. Completely blows my mind. So a big welcome to listeners from those countries because I'm so glad to be making that sort of reach. It's just amazing. So I actually have 2 guests today, and they happen to be from one of those top 7 countries above. I connected with David and Michelle St. Martin on LinkedIn, actually, where they began video documenting and posting the story of their family. I started to watch their first video, and as I was watching it, I started to think that they would be really great podcast guests. And so with that being the case, I knew I had to stop watching because if they were to ever come on and be guests, I wanted to hear their story for the first time here along with the rest of you. So that's what we get to do today. David and Michelle have agreed to share their story on infertility, foster care, and adoption as our very first guests from the UK. Big welcome, David and Michelle. Hi.
Hey, Alex.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
Wonderful.
Thank you for the great intro.
Oh, of course. I'm so glad that you all are here. Like I said, I'm so glad to have the first guests from another country. This is just mind-blowing and amazing to me.
Isn't it amazing just how much tech we do rely on? I know we want to disconnect sometimes, but to do things like this where we can literally connect like-minded individuals globally is a huge thing. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It makes the world feel a little bit smaller and a little bit more connected, and that's a great feeling.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more with you, Alex.
And I wanted to mention too, I think I maybe commented on your video and just, talked about how I wanted to hear more about your story. And David, the response I got from you, you sent me back a video message, and nobody has ever done that. And I was so blown away how cool that was.
Yeah, again, really trying to utilize tech. I think, sending the message back is brilliant, but if you can actually see the person that you've connected to, it just builds up a little bit more of a stronger relationship. And clearly it works because a couple of weeks later, you and I and Michelle are talking.
Yep, absolutely. And I know the podcast platform that we're using now, they've just rolled out a video, like a beta video version. And so at some point that may be a possibility for the podcast as well. But my problem is, since we're in isolation, I only wash my hair like once a week, and I don't want to be on video yet.
I feel you. I feel you. The same here. I wash mine once a week, so I'm glad we're doing this just by speaking.
So you've seen my picture, Alex. I've got the only hair I have is a beard and eyebrows. So that's not a concern for me. Although it needs waxing, so that's all good.
So does your wife do your waxing during the isolation, or are you able to get out?
Oh, no. It's sorry, when I say waxing, that's actually wrong. I mean, like buffing, when you shine a car, that kind of wax on my head rather than, wax, because that would be quite painful, I think.
Absolutely. So do you wax your head to make it shiny?
I just put on really shiny cream because I just can't control the shine. So a quick story, Alex. My sister's a designer, and I've updated my LinkedIn profile, and even that I had so much shine on my head. So my sister retouched my head, made it more matted, just so there's not as much shine on my LinkedIn profile. So that's the kind of world that I live in.
Oh, that is so funny. Well, thanks for your sister. I keep telling my husband, Joel, he's going to be so mad at me for saying this, but he has sprouted a few grays in his beard. And I'm trying to convince him to let me do like a little just for men hair color. And he's not about it. He is proudly sporting that gray hair.
Hey, listen, it's good enough for George Clooney. It's good enough for Joel, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, let's go ahead and get jumped into the questions.
Fantastic.
All right. So how did your journey as a family begin? Like, where did you meet and how did you meet?
So Michelle and I have been together now for coming on 25 years in November. So we met in 95. I was a pup at 20. Michelle was 21, so it kind of gives away our ages now.
Only a few months older than you, though.
Only a few months older. And we met through family friends. And it's like anything, you know, when you're young, you kind of meet someone for the first time, you feel there's a spark, and then that's what date two's there for. And I kind of knew after date two that I don't need a date three. I think Michelle probably would have wanted another few dates, but I kind of managed to win her heart within a matter of a couple of days.
In the first day.
So, so 25 years together, and we celebrate in August our 23rd year anniversary.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's huge.
Thank you. That's gone so quick, isn't it?
It's really quick, actually.
So, Michelle, let me ask you this. Was David doing the one that was kind of like chasing you?
He was. I've got to admit it. But, you know, it was love at first sight for me. It's funny because, as David said, we met through friends. And then when we finally was introduced to each other, David was actually dating somebody.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, no, he's with somebody and he's so handsome. But he did do the right thing. And although we was talking, he did end that relationship. Thank God he did, because he wouldn't be mine. And then we started our relationship, and I've never looked back, actually. So, yeah. He truly is the love of my life, so I am lucky.
That is very sweet.
It's a good job, Alex. We're not recording this via video because I'm welling up right now. So.
Oh. Well, so are you the crier in the relationship then?
You know what? I'm actually proud to say that if there's a real good soppy film on that pulls at my heartstrings, or either to do with mainly dogs, canines get me going all the time, I'd happily shed a tear. I think it's good to clear your tear ducts every so often.
You need to get them cleaned out.
I do, yes. I do. I might have a good old cry after this, I think.
Alex, there was a film we watched. What was the film we watched about the couple that adopted them children?
Oh, you put me on the spot now. I will find out.
There was a really good film we watched, and I must admit we were crying through that. It did bring back so many memories.
You know the one with Mark Wahlberg? Is it called
Instant Family?
Instant Family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
Well, we did cry through that film. We're not going to lie.
Yes, we did too. That was actually offered as part of our training. We received training hours to see that video.
Oh, did you? Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's great. And I know we're going to go into our story, but we kind of knew what the headlines of that film was. But our son, who was 9 at the time, sat down and watched it with us. And at that point, I'm jumping the gun here, Alex, but at that point, he actually asked us questions about him and being adopted, and he actually said, "Thank you for choosing me." And that's what blew us away. And that was in the first
watching that film.
Yeah, in the first kind of 15 minutes of the film. So yeah, a beautiful film. Anyone that hasn't seen it, definitely get out to see that film. Yeah,
and it sounds like it was a very important kind of conversation starter for him.
Mm-hmm.
It opened the door for him.
Yeah, 100%. And although he knows that he's adopted, we talk about it not often, but when there's situations or circumstances that come up, we talk about it. And often he'll ask or say to Michelle, why was I born in your heart and not your tummy? So, but we'll definitely go deeper into that, Alex. I think it's important to, recognise the views around, do you tell your child that they are adopted? And then that's one thing for us we opted for from even before our son came to us.
Yeah. Well, and we did have that scheduled for a question later, but since we're jumping into it, let's just dive in head first. So what kind of conversations do you have with him? You've mentioned that he's adopted, and we'll kind of go back on the beginning of that story a little bit later. But what kind of conversations do you have now? He's 9, so he understands much
10.
more. He's 10.
Yeah, he's 10 now. Yeah.
Okay.
So Alex, we started out, so as David just said, it was something that we planned to do from the beginning because we always wanted to be open and honest with him. I think otherwise things can come back and bite you in the backside. So we decided to, when we got him when he was 21 months old, obviously we didn't talk about it then, but we'd done it as he was growing more as a story. So like reading your children a storybook, our storybook was his life. So we went for it down that road just via just pictures, and I was then saying to him as he was growing that I always told him from little that he grew in mummy's heart rather than my tummy. So as he was growing, he had that image in his head. And then questions did come up later on, why did I grow in your heart? So he would see someone pregnant and he would say to me, Mummy, why did I not grow in your tummy? And I used to say to him, Betty, because Mummy had a really bad bellyache and I loved you that much that you grew in my heart so that you could grow in somebody else's tummy to come to me. And by telling him a story like that, it's really helped him understand. I don't know if David mentioned earlier on, but we celebrated his anniversary on the 4th of July. So we've had him 9 years. And that was the first time that he really started asking us questions. And he was saying that this was his adoption day, how lucky he was. So all of the years that we've been talking about growing in my heart and how important it was for us to tell him that story, it's really resonating with him now as he's getting older.
So does he have questions about, different families call it different things. I've heard it be called his tummy mommy. Does he have questions about his biological family?
He doesn't. And I'm sure that will come. But yeah, he doesn't bring it up. He doesn't ask, what happened. And, down the road, there will be, further questions around that. And, why was he put into care? What was the situation with his tummy mummy? And I think the fact that we've laid the foundation, albeit very gently, a number of years ago, and it's starting to kind of manifest more now, it's him knowing that he is able to discuss it and talk to us about it. But it may well be, Alex, that over the next kind of year, 18 months, when he goes into secondary school, that we'll have to have that very detailed conversation around that. At the moment, although he's 10, we still see him as our bubbling, beautiful, bouncy boy. Yeah. And we kind of feel that, I'm talking for me, not Michelle now, but I kind of feel once I cross that line and I go into details about it, I may take away some of his innocence as a child. And I'm not willing to do that right now. If the question comes out, of course I will. But I want him to still, be that child. And I've heard stories, I've spoken to people over the years where when they have sat down with their child and discussed this is the reason, the dynamics of that child changes because of the confusion, the uncertainty.
I think that's something that we would have to sit down again prior to, and it would always be done, Alex, really subtly. I don't think we'd ever go into the full detail about the reason why he was placed for adoption, just for the fact that, some parents aren't able to look after their children. It's best for them to go to an adoptive family where they can have all the love and be looked after just as much as their birth families want. I think that what we have to bear in mind here with adoption, there's so many different cases why children go into the system. For us, we was quite lucky that Bailey's weren't severe. It was just a youngster having a child, where some of the situations of children going into care can be quite graphic and quite disturbing. And I think with those situations, that's something that, if that was our case, that would be something that I would never be willing to talk to my child about. So it all depends on the situation, where the child's come from, how you play that when you get the child. So, and it's always been very subtle to their needs when you're talking about it, if you do ever decide to talk about it.
Yeah. In the limited amount of time that I've been able to speak with the two of you and kind of hear your story and hear your thoughts, it seems like you are very prepared. You've thought about everything in great detail and you're very intentional. And I commend you for that, because it's some adoptive parents, I feel, are a little bit more nonchalant, and that opens the door for some kind of scary situations, whether that was the intention or not. So I really commend you for how intentional you are and how much thought it seems that you've put into these conversations with him.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Alex. I think for us as well, because it was such a long time ago that we started, or that we finalised the process of adopting our son. But back then it was a longer process. So, for us, it took us just over 3 years to go through the very start of the process, through to the workshops, through to having the social workers come to our home. And that was a long time. And I know it's accelerated now in terms of the process, certainly in the UK. I mean, from start to finish, you can be approved within kind of 8 months. But for us back then, it took a longer time. And I think with that, we did have challenges around the system, so to speak, that it didn't feel as fluid, that it was really dragging on. There were certain things that we were doing to accelerate the process, and regretfully, it still took a long time. But within that time, Alex, it enabled us to do a lot more researching, talk to people that had gone through the process, going onto forums. And obviously the forums back then were nowhere like now. I mean, you can just type in, adoptive forum, and you'd have a choice of 1,500 forums you can jump onto, which I think is amazing. But again, for us, it was just leveraging off of the support around us, which again helped us to identify the best way to present that to our son.
But I also think as human beings, that's just the way we are. So Alex, everything since having my child, every decision I make, everything I do is around him and his well-being and his mental state and the love and everything we provide. So is always my first thought. So with the decisions, the way that we talk to him, the way that we want to be honest with him and how we do that, it's always making sure that his heart is always intact through that process. So that's so important to me, to be able to deliver that to him.
Well, you are very obviously wonderful parents, and I'm so glad that you're sharing your story with us today, because it's a really important one. And let's take it back 23 to 25 years ago, because your adoption story actually starts before the adoption process did. So did you initially try to grow your family like naturally or biologically when you first met and got together?
We did, yes. So we got together and then we decided, actually, when I first fell pregnant, it was an accident, I suppose, like most pregnancies are, but it wasn't an unwanted accident. I was surprised and really excited. And then I had a miscarriage. I think I was about 12 weeks pregnant. So we had a miscarriage, but most women that get pregnant, they tend to lose a baby somewhere along the way. So my outlook on that was, that's fine. We're going to try again, when the time's right. And then that time came over the next 10 years. So we lost a baby every year for 9 years.
Oh, my goodness.
We had 5 miscarriages. I had 3 ectopic pregnancies where the baby grows in the fallopian tube. And that's really, there's not many women that would actually have 3 ectopic pregnancies. One of those nearly took my life. And I think that was where the point, enough was enough of trying naturally to have a baby. And then we did have IVF. So we had, how many rounds of IVF did we have, David?
So we had 2 sets of IVF, and both unsuccessful. And then we had 1 frozen embryo transfer, again, unsuccessful. And the thing, Alex, I mean, it was after our last bout of unsuccessful IVF, we kind of at that point said, right, you know what, let's just, look, it's just going to be us now. It's just going to be you and I, and, let's just see where life takes us.
And that broke my heart. That thought of that, Alex, absolutely broke my heart, because I've got 2 sisters and they've both got 2 beautiful children each, and I've never abused drugs. I've never drunk excessively. I've always tried to keep a healthy, balanced diet and tried to do everything by the book. So even when I was pregnant, I, took all the vitamins. I used to lay there with my legs up against the wall thinking, no, this one's going to stay in. Nothing's going to happen. But it always did happen. And then when I nearly died through an ectopic pregnancy, it was raw, and it just brings everything home that if I'm not here, then my sisters don't get me, my nieces and my nephew don't get me. And it was trying to find a balance of then what's important, although my heart was completely broken and I cried myself to sleep so many times because I desperately wanted to be a mum, but it just wasn't happening. But I didn't want to lose my life in the process.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It was, because of the ectopic pregnancies previously, there was only 2. So therefore, in our mind, there was no chance of Michelle falling pregnant because, for me, there was no tubes, any fallopian tubes. And then when Michelle, fell pregnant and it was another ectopic, and that for me, Alex, when, I almost lost Michelle, it destroyed me. And you get to a stage where you think, well, all this is because we want to have a family. We want to be together. We want to nurture a child. We want to, to grow as a family. And yet Michelle was landing. It was an emergency surgery, landing in hospital, and it was close. It was really close to me losing her. And and so when kind of recovery time comes around, despite. Admittedly, it was more me, before after the unsuccessful IVF to say, look, I think that's it now. We can't go through anymore.
Yeah.
And then literally it was a kind of a eureka moment where we both kind of sat there and said, well, why don't we consider adoption?
Yeah, for sure.
And it was like, as soon as we said it, and I remember it so vividly, it was just like a wave of emotions around, well, this was our journey. This was our, whatever path was laid out for us when we got together all them years ago, our path was to adopt a child. And that's when it all started.
Once we started having the discussions about adoption. And for me, initially, it was really hard because I'd gone through so much. But now looking back on it, I honestly can say, hand on my heart, I wouldn't change a thing. If somebody said to me now, if you could have your own birth child or go down the road of adoption, I'd go down the road of adoption every time. And I think I had to go through all of that heartache to be able to realise that it takes certain people to be able to adopt a child. We're so blessed as a couple that we were able to do that together and survive all of the miscarriages and heartache, because so many couples don't survive past that. It just becomes too much. We did survive that.
That is so beautiful.
Thank you, Alex. And I do believe... You'll have to excuse me if I feel a little bit choked up. Sometimes it's hard to talk about things without the tears flowing.
Well, I'm so glad you did.
All for the right reason.
Yeah.
And I would do it all again in a heartbeat.
I'm so glad that you're so courageous and able to share such a beautiful story, because I'm hearing in your voices that you're looking back through the journey that you've been on and all of the extremely difficult things that you've been through. And it kind of seems like it's just your journey. It's your story, and it's where you were supposed to be. And now you are where you are supposed to be. That's how the story was supposed to go. And I'm getting choked up hearing it because it's so beautiful. I'm so glad that you're here able to share this.
Oh, thank you, Alex. And it's so true. And I always say to people that children don't have to come from you to go through you. And I would say that 1,000 times. It's so true that, when you have a family, it's not about the children coming from you. So many birth families have children and they, don't respect their children. They've got no love for them and they just seem to be there as like an accessory. And I've seen it firsthand. It's about the love, the support, the guidance you give a child. And to be a mum, it's not for the children to come from you. You can become a mum in so many different forms. And I'm so, so glad that we went down the path we did and we managed to get the child that we did, because I honestly believe he was born for us. And I really do believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think to add to that as well, Alex, it's... Every decision that Michelle and I took through discussing, going down the route of adoption, the one thing I say to anyone contemplating it, and this is, why we want to do this, and I know why you're doing this journey as well, Alex, is to inspire and encourage couples, individuals that want to offer a life to a child. And the key takeaway is you have to be open and honest with your partner. And that's one thing I learned, Alex, through all the adversity that Michelle and I went through. I never, ever told Michelle how I felt because, she was going through this. She was losing the children. She was laid up in hospital. She was having all these operations. And for me, I felt like I can't add to that pressure. So, on reflection, I kept quiet. But on reflection, Michelle then thought, well, do I really, why am I not being as open? Why am I not telling Michelle how I'm feeling? And ultimately, it comes down to that support and me not wanting to add any burden to it. But you learn your lessons. And again, if there's anyone out there going through that, and it's certainly from a male figure, be open, talk to your partner, tell them honestly how you're feeling, because you also are going through this, not physically, but the mental torture as a couple that you go through. And if you can't elevate your voices and amplify your voices together, then that's when relationships do start to suffer.
Yes, that's wonderful advice. And that's another reason why I like to have guests on and broadcast their story, is because a lot of times there are things that we can all look back and say, I did this okay, but there was something I could have done a little better. And I think that's so helpful to people who may be in the same sort of situation or may come up on a similar situation, is just to know, somebody else has been through it, and this may be an alternate option of how to handle the situation I'm currently in. So when you've made the decision that you wanted to begin the adoption process, how did you start?
So we went through our local authority, so you have the agencies and then you have the local authorities. So we went through the local authority to express our interests in terms of going down the adoption route. And so again, we're probably now talking circa 2008. And the start of the process really is a kind of an open evening where you go down and you meet with other potential adoptive parents, and I think there was about 30 or 40 couples.
There was a lot of people
on that one night. And when we walked in there, we realised all these families wanted families, and they're there to have their interest levels to adopt. So that was the first thing for us, and then we then registered our interest. And then we attended a workshop, which was a kind of 4-day workshop that allowed us to talk to the social workers, talk to other people that were going on that journey the journey of them adopting. And so the first day was pretty deep. The reason why you want to go down adoption, your story, and bearing in mind you're talking to strangers. And kind of day one, we survived day one, although it was exhausting.
It was emotionally draining, wasn't it?
And then day two come, and within this immediate group that we was in, already there was kind of 4 couples that no longer wanted to partake in the journey. So day two was really difficult. We were digging deep into emotions around our histories, our childhood, sadness, adversity in your life, and there were things that I'd buried, Alex, deep of my growing up, and having to discuss that in front of strangers. It felt like it was a session. It was an anonymous session where you're opening up your feelings.
There was reasons behind their thinking of that, though, wasn't there?
Yeah, because they need to make sure that there's, throughout the adoption process, that you're completely open around, are you able to cater for the needs of a child? And if you have such deep rooted challenges that you haven't expressed or addressed, then that could have an effect when you're bringing in a child into your home. So we got through to day two, and then the last couple of days were great. We met some other parents that had adopted. They told us their story. So those 4 days, it was a very long 4 days, but it really gave us the chance to ask a ton of questions and get the kind of responses that we didn't always expect. But that it was very honest and very raw, which I really appreciated. And at that stage, we then went on to getting our references done and being assigned a social worker.
So after the 4 days, I feel like those 4 days probably, like you said, were very emotionally draining. But did you find them a bit therapeutic as well?
On reflection, yes. At the time, no. I think at the time for me, it was more around, well, why do they need to know that? Why do I need to talk about, losing my father at a young age and, not addressing it? There were so many things where I personally felt that I could have, if I felt there was an issue, I would have addressed them. But actually, I didn't. And that's why they were buried. So it was a great example for us to talk openly, and also the social team get to know you as well. They get to know the type of couple you are, and so it was brilliant. I'm sure now they've reduced that time in terms of the workshops, but for us it was 4 days, and it was very eye opening. But one thing it did do for us, Alex, it reassured us that this is the journey that we needed to be on.
Okay.
Also, just to add to that, Alex, I think for people that are listening, we all go through different things in our childhood. Some of us have a happy childhood, some of us not so happy. The social workers don't judge you on that. My childhood was far from happy, and I was so scared to talk about things that happened to me growing up. But I did, and I'm so glad that I did, because it helps in so many ways, and they are there to help you get through that as well, and they don't judge you on things that you've gone through. So if somebody's listening to think, well, actually, they might ask me things and I really don't want to talk about it, they might judge me on that, they really don't. So I just want to reiterate that. So if you have gone through good or bad growing up yourself, that they don't judge you on that. They're there just to make sure that you can address it, you've dealt with it, and that you're there to provide love and support for a child.
Yes. Similarly, when we did our home study, part of that was an interview with a social worker. And I do remember a lot of the questions that she asked were deep, childhood related, related to my parents and how they raised me growing up. And I think it was a little less invasive probably than the workshop that you went to, but it sounds like worldwide that is an important factor. How you were raised and how you handle trauma and how you handle adversity in your life, because it can relate to how you are as a parent of a child who may have experienced trauma as well.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. That's so true. And that's why they do it. They just need to make sure that, you're able, because children, you've got to think children are in the system and they're going up for adoption for a reason. It's not because they're going up for adoption because they come from the perfect family. That's never the case. There's always a reason why a child needs to go to somebody else. So it's that you're able to deal with their issues, especially if you're going for, an older child, I would say, that's got more memory of things that have happened to them. It's how you deal with that without triggering any memories that you may have experienced at their age.
Yes. So you completed the 4-day workshop. What happened next?
So then we was assigned a social worker, and that then went through our chronological background. So we then break down individually kind of our life from birth to present, and that was
a long process.
It was a long process, and as I say, Alex, I mean, we are talking, kind of circa 2008, 2009 now, and at that stage, it's what I don't want to do is to let anyone know that it's still as long as a process, because it really isn't. Certainly in the UK, it is a much quicker process, but for us, it just seemed to take a long time to go through that, and so everything that you'd imagine a social worker going through in terms of your health. Your physical health, your mental health, talking about your childhood into adulthood, your job, what happens when...
Relationships that you've been involved in.
Relationships, what happens on the job front when one of the individuals then give up work to look after the child, and things around the house. Even at that point, we just started the process and knowing that, okay, we need to get a lock on that cupboard and you need to make sure that's secure, and yep, for sure. But again, it depends on the age of the child coming into the home as well. So for us, in the end, it took about 18 months of going through the process. But even within that time, there were moments where we just had a wobble, I guess, best way to explain it, where we just felt that at times it is very intrusive. And of course, there has to be reasons why. But when you're covering off some of the same ground, we just felt that a lot more could have been done in one session rather than a 20-minute discussion on something which actually we could have spoken for an hour on that one topic, and that would have maybe saved us a couple of weeks worth of waiting for the next session. But, for us, it's very, very formal. One thing for sure, and I'm sure you experienced this, Alex, with Joel, is around the social worker, around the person that, in essence, is your advocate, is making sure you're really honest with them as well. And the relationship between you and your social worker is vital. And, again, there were stages for us where we probably wasn't as honest as we could have been at the very early start of our dealing with them, and that may have delayed some time, whereas actually, you know what, if I can be completely open with you about us and our faults and what we're looking for and the type of profile, the type of child that we're looking to bring into our home, then again, that kind of accelerates the process as well.
Yes. So once you've done the meetings with your social worker and you've got your home in order and you've given them everything you know about yourself, or as much as you'd like to give them, let's get to the exciting part. How were you matched with your son?
So for us, and it's really important, and on our journey that we documented, Alex, one thing that we made crystal clear is you have to be honest with your capabilities. And with that, I mean that if you're looking for a child between a certain age range, if you're looking for a child within certain, do they have disabilities? And if they do, how much are you willing to take on in terms of a disability? Because it's not a sweeping brush where, okay, well, there's some hearing challenges, therefore the registered disabled. It could be physical disability or mental disability. So the key there is just to be honest with the types of profile that you're looking for. And we were. So when a day came and we had seen previously a handful of profiles, but they were outside of our in essence, our wish list. They were older children, which is really hard, isn't it, to see a profile?
It is, and I think I'd say to that, Alex, the reason why we had that wish list because I had lost so many babies and I desperately wanted to have a younger child where, as a mum, I could feed them a bottle, I could change their nappy, I could do the potty training. I didn't want to have everything taken away from me and just get an older child. And some people might think that might sound a bit selfish, but I'd gone through so much. I just wanted to experience some of those early stages in being a mum with a child. So we opted for the age to have a child under 2. And I think me and David were both on the same thing for that. We wanted to be able to bring a child in where we could just experience some of those early needs for a child, because I'd yearned for it for so long. I'd gone through so much heartache that I just wanted to be able to, when a child come into our home, that I could just feel that early nurture years. Does that make sense? So I don't want people to think, oh, you just wanted this. It was just because we'd gone through so much. So everybody's journey is going to be different. So that's why we decided to go for a younger child. And although that was heartbreaking because we did turn children away that were older, it needed to be right for us.
You're absolutely right. And sometimes it is hard to talk about that, and it's hard to talk about the perfect match for your family. Mm-hmm. But I love that you are able to do that so honestly, because I know a hot topic right now, at least where we are, is the second chance adoptions. And for listeners who aren't familiar with that, that's when a family adopts a child and then later determines that it's not a good fit and then must find another adoptive family to adopt that child. And, there's a story going on in the news right now where that has been highly publicized, and it's traumatic for a child to be adopted once and then a second time. And so you're absolutely right in saying that even though you may have very specific, I don't want to call it requirements, but requirements for the child that you bring into your home, it's very important to get it right the first time.
Yeah, and look, there's never going to be any guarantees. But again, if you're honest with what you're looking for, then that helps. And the second chance adoptions, Alex, is so heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking for the child, that's gone through a period of time being adopted and the breakdown of that placement. And you just hope that there's so much around the welfare system that allows as much help as possible. to try to amend and repair that before it does break down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask too, because the matching process sounds a little bit different than how I'm used to seeing it. So when you were able to see which children were available for adoption, where were those children currently living? Were they living in foster homes or group homes, or what was the situation there?
Yeah, so they were in foster homes. So we have group homes as well, but these profiles were foster homes. And it wasn't like they gave us an option of, look, here's 3, choose one that suits. It was, we see one profile and then wasn't suitable. And then, 4 months later, there'll be another profile that come through. So, and that's where the patience comes in, is to realize that you're not going to get lots of profiles at once.
And you have to, and that's about being honest with yourself. You have to make sure that, when you see the profiles, the whole reason you do the journey and the workshops and spend all that time with your social worker is because you're spending all that time discussing with them about what you're looking for and how it's going to work for your family. Because as I said earlier, we're all different. We all come in all different shapes and forms as families. So it's really important that that's addressed and you're honest with that from the beginning, and that's why we decided to say no to certain profiles, because it weren't what we'd been discussing over the previous months, years that we'd spent with our social worker. And then when we finally got the profile of our child, it was an instant, I know that's the one. Mm-hmm. I know that child was born for our family, and it was such a different feeling and I know that's really hard to hear, but it was a different feeling to the other profiles that we'd seen. This one that we saw was definitely the one that pulled on all my heartstrings. It was definitely the one where I felt, this child was born for us for sure. And it was the most amazing feeling.
And even that though, Alex, although we had the call on the day to say, look, we've matched you to a child, but it wasn't until the following day that they came round and showed us the profile. And as Michelle said, immediately we fell in love with this beautiful boy. And then you think that's it. You think, okay, where do I sign? And then it wasn't like that, because then they have to match. They have to go through the matching system. So then they have another 1 or 2 couples that they take forward to panels, a matching panel. For us, it's 1 more couple, but normally they'd have 3 couples that go through to matching, and it's then down to the social workers to deem who is the right profile to have this child come into their lives. And again, we were very blessed that our son came to us. And then in terms of next steps after that, it was about a 2-month window, 2.5-month window when we were told that our son has been matched to us. There's other checks and stuff that are done behind the scenes. And then we got to see our son.
Well, also, we had to go to a panel, didn't we, and speak to them. So there was a panel of people that have adopted children, other social workers. So I think there was about 10 of them in a room, and then myself and David and our social worker turned up to this panel meeting, and then they talked to you about this child and what you can do for them. How are you going to address their needs? So different children might come from different ethnic backgrounds, and how you're going to address that. How are you going to bring that into their life? And for us, our child does come from a background of ethnicity. So there's things that we had to speak about that to the panel. So you have to be really open and honest, and you have to be real. You know, there's no hiding behind anything. You've got to talk from your heart and say it as you see fit as a parent. This is how you're going to raise a child. This is what you're going to do for their interests, whether they've got different backgrounds. This is how you're going to make sure that they're fully aware of that through their growing up. So we done that panel, and then we got the call to say that he had been matched to us. There was never a doubt in my mind that I thought he wouldn't be, because as soon as I saw his profile, I knew that the good Lord above was looking down on us, that was going to be my child. And I can honestly say that I never had a doubt that he was not going to come to be ours. Mm-hmm. And we got the call to say that he was, and then that's just when all the tears flowed. And it was finally, after all them years of heartache, that, you know, it wasn't going to be taken away.
I love that. That is such a surreal, I bet it was such a surreal moment. Did he immediately come to live with you then, or was there a transition?
So there's normally a 5-day transition. And so kind of day one, you're there for a couple of hours, just, because, you know, he's meeting these big adults for the first time. So we took him to the local park and in his pushchair, and it was just, I vividly remember what he was wearing, and that memory will never go. The first day I met my son, and then kind of day 2, we was able to have him for pretty much the whole day, and we kind of finished day 2, and Michelle and I said, look, you know, there is no need to keep dragging this out for another 3 days. You know, this is our son. We identified him being our son the second we saw him, or second we really saw his profile. So we spoke to our social workers and pleaded our case that we think is in the best interest, just to accelerate the process. And those really, like, I'm sure it was out of character for them, but they allowed us to pick him up on day 3, and then day 3 was it, that we didn't have to wait any longer. And so it was a whirlwind of emotions. There's lots of challenges that come with a parent, but suddenly when you're thrown into being a parent overnight and not having that integration for a toddler, and sleep and routine and everything else, but you know, you get through this. So then once we've gone through that, and then we had a social worker visit us every week over a 6-month period, because they, again, talking about the placement, any concerns we have, any additional support that we need. And the resources they gave us, Alex, were fantastic. So little things like getting us involved in front of toddler and parent groups, getting us involved in some extra workshops around parenting, because for us, you don't get that textbook on how to be a great parent. You get that through life experiences and talking to friends. And so that was for 6 months. And then we were very blessed to then legally adopt our son.
Wonderful.
Which was 6 months later.
So in the UK, is there a rule that the child must live with you for 6 months before the adoption can be finalized?
Yeah, so there is a rule. It's now, they've reduced it to, I think, something like 12 to 14 weeks.
Okay.
So again, we're talking, many years ago. So they've really tried to, I think what the welfare system has identified is it was taking too long, especially because these young children and young adults were remaining in the system, in the care system, and the negative effect that has on them emotionally, knowing that you're up for adoption and yet you're still waiting, and months and months and months can go past. So yeah, it's been accelerated now, which is thankful, I think, for anyone coming into adopting in the UK.
What a cool story. One thing I wanted to talk about, just to see if there may be any differences, because one of the reasons I feel that many prospective adoptive parents are hesitant is because of the money. And that's also something that's hard to talk about. Adoption, at least here, is very, very expensive. Is it also expensive in the UK? It
is. So I can only talk about our experiences. So knowing that we had asked for a profile child between 0 to 2, what comes with that is if you get a newborn baby, then the type of material that you need.
But that's the same when you have a baby anyway. I think, Alex, are you asking, did we have to pay anything to go down the adoption route?
Yeah, either way. I mean, you're right. Adoption, having a baby, parenting is expensive either way. But specifically, the actual adoption of your child, was it expensive with like legal fees? Did you have fees? Normally we would pay them to an agency, but you said you went through a local entity. Were there high fees associated with that?
No, none at all. There's no legal fees involved. There's no placement fees at all. The only real fees for us was on getting medicals done and getting criminal checks done, which are, a couple of £100 at best. So, yeah, there's no fees at all involved.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing, because here you can spend easily $40,000.
Wow.
And a lot of times you'll spend a majority of that money or a chunk of that money, and it'll go to the agency, or it will go to a birth mother for living expenses or medical expenses. And then there's a decent chance that she changes her mind and decides to parent her child, and there's no way to recoup that money. It's just gone. And so that's a big fear here, I know, in the adoptive community.
Is that state by state, Alex?
I'm not 100% sure. I know each state has different rules as to what adoptive families are legally allowed to pay for birth mothers. So, for example, I could pay living expenses, transportation, clothing, food, things like that for a birth mother, but I wouldn't be able to give her a gift or like a diamond necklace or, you know, something that would be considered. It has to do with it's very illegal to buy a child. And so they have those lines drawn.
Do you have the local authorities out there to be able to go through your local authorities like we do in the UK?
Well, see, I'm not exactly sure what the equivalent would be, but I'm assuming that would be DCS, the Department of Children's Services, or DSS. Yes. I'm thinking would be about the same.
It sounds very similar, yes. So the Department of Social Services, yeah.
Yes. And so if we were wanting to adopt through that type of agency, it would need to start, I believe, in foster care. And I know you said you had some experience in foster care as well. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So we, in circa 2015, so we'd had our son for 4 years. We recently moved to a new house. And one thing Michelle and I kept talking about is opening up our home and our hearts to children that are in the system, so via the route of foster care. And it was quite a quick process because we'd had all of the paperwork from our adoption paperwork, so all the chronology reports and references, etc. So we only had to update the kind of previous years. And that was actually via an agency, Alex. And so they came round and they looked at us and how Bailey is. And they said, look, you know, you have a lovely home. You can have up to 3 children. And we're like, well, that's a lot. Bearing in mind, we've got our son. You know, we need to make sure the transition of any child coming in suits the family. But certainly, you know, for him, I mean, he was kind of coming up to 6 at the time. So we said, look, done all the paperwork, and we went through being approved foster carers, and it's very similar to the panel when you go through to foster is the questions on why you want to do this, what's the end result, do you have the capacity to nurture and encourage children irrelevant of their age. So we went through that process, got approved, and pretty much within a couple of weeks we were given 3 siblings. And when you see the profiles of these siblings, and they had been in long-term foster care, that placement had broken down due to the inefficiencies of that particular carer, we found it really hard to say no, because these, you know, 3 children, very close.
They needed somewhere to go, because the placement they'd been with, Alex said, actually, although it was a foster carer, she was abusing the children, so they'd gone from being removed from the same sort of scenario, being placed in a placement which was really not that much better. So we felt that when we saw the profiles that we just wanted to give them so much love and let them know that actually there are people out there that don't do bad things and that do love children, and we'll give them a chance.
Wow.
And the regret behind that is the placement wasn't right for us as brand new foster carers to suddenly get 3 sibling groups coming in. But what they omitted to tell us was each of the children had pretty severe challenges around behavioural challenges and mental challenges. And that's, again, everything always comes back to the honest and open discussion with your advocate or your social worker around the profile of the child that you're looking at. And, you know, for us, the placement lasted 6 months. We tried to give as much help and resource to them, but it ended up resulting in verbal abuse to our son. The placement was breaking down really quickly. Social services were getting involved, but they didn't want to separate the 3 children. And, you know, regretfully, it got to a stage where they for us, we couldn't have all 3 because one of the oldest one was, very troubling. But we agreed to, you know, allow them to move on to a new placement. In the new placement, they actually separated the children, which is terrible to separate a sibling group. But when that group of siblings isn't in the right environment, then it's only going to cause more challenges down the line.
And sometimes as well, Alex, when children, although they're natural birth siblings, sometimes it is in the best interest, depending on what they've been around and seen, and for the best welfare of their own development, it's to separate them. And I do believe in this situation that had they have done that in the beginning, then, you know, the children, if they had separated them, they would still be in our care.
Yeah.
So that was a really, really hard decision because, as I said to you earlier on in this podcast, my main focus is obviously my son and his well-being, because he still has attachment issues, and, you know, there's still things that we have to work on. Although he's grown to be the most amazing, loving boy I could ever wish for, it's just protecting him from anything. So when these children came, I didn't realise, actually, looking back on it now, I think he was too young to go through that. If we were doing the journey now and him being a bit older and wiser and having a more understanding of his self-worth and his development, I think it would be a different story. But I think maybe at the time our child was too young to actually have put him through that, when the whole purpose was extending his sibling group, hopefully being able to adopt a child on the back of fostering. So I had all these visions in my head how it would work out.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite work out like that for us.
Well, let me ask you this. Does your foster care system have some sort of method of indicating children in foster care who may have elevated needs, like behavioral needs or medical needs? Here we have like a level 1 child would be a child that doesn't have any sort of special needs or disabilities or delays. And then a level 2 or a level 3 would require more therapies. Do you have a similar system there?
Yeah, we do. I don't think they necessarily broke it down into levels. I think it was more around, this is the profile of the child or children, and this is what's been identified. But regretfully, sometimes when it comes to working with an agency, they would get that profile from a local authority. Now, bearing in mind, with a local authority, if they're trying to place a child, they may not necessarily disclose as much as what they should do. And they have a duty of care to disclose everything to a potential foster carer, because they're in your care. But what we've seen over the years is that sometimes they're not as open just because they need to place a child. And your perception, if you get told this child is this and is that and he needs, you know, a lot of work being nurtured and encouraged, and you may not have the ability to do that, it may put you off then fostering that child. So it's very similar in terms of the profiles, Alex. We just don't necessarily have it in kind of, you know, in tiers, really, in tier groups.
Yes, and that's a common theme here too, not necessarily in adoption, but in foster care, is you will hear of DCS or the placement workers omitting information in order to make the placement easier for them. Exactly. And it's just awful. I mean, there's no way to stop it. I don't know of any way to stop it other than to just keep talking about it and keep promoting transparency.
100%. Completely.
So do you two have any advice for prospective foster or adoptive parents?
I think for me, Alex, for adoption, I think it's, again, as I said earlier on, you have to be honest about what you're looking for from, you know, your family needs. So whether you want a younger child, you know, a child from maybe 5 to 8, an older child. So it's what's going to work best within your current family. If you've got children already, as obviously me and David didn't have any children. So to go for the younger child, to be able to have those early moments, to be able to, because it's something that I'd always dreamt of, that was something that we really needed to go down that road of the, you know, route to 2-year-old, which is what we've done. But it's, when you adopt a child, people ask me all the time, you know, how do you feel that the child didn't grow in your tummy? You know, is the love different? For me, my answer will always be the same. The love's more. The love that I have for my child is so immense. I wake up thinking of him. I go to sleep thinking of him. I couldn't imagine my life without him. So it's, if you're going to go down that journey and it's you want to create your family, I just think of all the children that are in the system I don't even bear thinking about it, to be honest. I think there's about, how many are there in the UK?
6,000.
6,000 children that need adopting. All them children, they're in foster care, and to be honest, a lot of foster care placements, they do it for the money. I know they do that for the, in the UK, and I know that's a hard thing to say, but it's true. These children, they need a permanent home. They need to be able to go to somebody that's going to love them, where they feel safe and protected. If you're able to provide that to a child, and the matching system, they get it right, then please, please, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and go down that road of making initial inquiries and just going on the first open evening that they offer you. I don't know if they offer that there in where you are, but they offer that here. You have an open evening, you go and attend that. And it's such a big eye-opener to think, when you hear about the stories of these children and how desperate they are for families, it is life-changing, and I'm so glad that we've done it. I can't advocate adoption enough. I just think it saved my life. I think if I didn't go down that road, I don't know if I'd be sitting here talking to you today, to be quite honest.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you are. I know we talked a little bit earlier about how I had stumbled across your video that you were making on LinkedIn. Tell us a little bit more about how you're documenting your journey.
So it was interesting. Michelle had said to me probably for about 8-9 months now that, what I'd like to do is to document our journey of adoption. And kind of me being me, thinking about, well, where would you put that platform? Do I really want people knowing like my business? And, although we're very open to our friends and family, it gets to a stage where if you're talking to strangers and how that feels. And yet Michelle said, and then lockdown happened, and Michelle said, look, this is a prime time for us to really document our journey. And we sat there and, automatically we said that, our journey of loss, because, we wanted to talk about our loss of miscarriages and ectopic pregnancies. And then we then flipped it to say, well, what about the love that we then had? So we've done it over a few episodes. We broke it down into different segments. So the first segment was, obviously the reason why we was doing this, and then the hurt of miscarriage, and then the strength of determination, and then our adoption journey. And, it's not a big production number. It was just us in front of a camera talking into the camera.
Nice, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the positive nature of what we received in return, Alex, was incredible. We've had so many people reach out to us, DM us. We've had Zoom calls with lots of different people to say, look, this is our journey, and just asking us questions. And, the more we can come together as a community, and I mean a community of parents, not, biological or adopted parents, but a community of parents, and sharing that one hope and dream, which is to give our children the best possible chance to survive in this world. And for us, if we've positively affected one person, one couple, one individual to consider adoption or fostering, then this journey has been really well worth it.
And I think we actually have already helped somebody. Obviously, I can't go into names, but I do think that we have actually helped somebody take that initial steps to go down the road of adoption. So that alone made everything worthwhile, to be able to broadcast our journey and knowing that it has actually helped people in the process, and also help heal scars that I thought were buried. It's been so lovely to be able to talk about. So it's such a taboo subject, isn't it, when you talk about painful things? People find it really hard to listen to. But we should be able to talk about the good, bad and ugly to be able to help things get better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our goals really seem to align here. And, you were mentioning that you had people reach out to you and send DMs. It's wonderful when somebody will reach out and say, hey, thank you for inspiring me, or thank you for sharing your story. But also, there are people who will take those first steps and inquire about foster care and inquire about adoption, but will never tell you that you were the reason that they took that first step. And just knowing that is really cool.
Yeah, it really is. And, one thing that Michelle and I say is, inspiration is a contact sport. And the more that we can inspire people to identify, maybe make a change, a mental shift in considering something like this, then, this is what, we're here to serve, aren't we? We're not just meat suits running around. We can actually make a big impact on this planet. And really by helping amplify these tiny, helpless little voices in children that don't have the ability to speak for themselves. So, but this is wonderful, Alex. I really appreciate you allowing us to share our journey with you and your audience.
And I'm so glad you did. How can listeners watch your series or contact you after the episode airs?
So we've got a really loose YouTube channel, so I will forward you the link. And the episodes will be on there. And we're really open to anyone connecting to us as well. We're on LinkedIn, so I'll send you the links to our LinkedIn profile. But even if anyone wants to just, drop us a DM or just to arrange a call because they've got a question. And, it would be honoured to try to answer those questions. And if we can't, then hopefully, we can get our voices and our resources together to answer those questions for them.
That is very generous. Thank you. And yes, when you send me that information, I'll go ahead and link it up on my Instagram page and my Facebook page. And that way listeners have, an easy link click to contact you if they would like to. Before we shut off and duck out for the day, I would love to encourage you to leave a review on the Purple Apple podcast app. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us what you like to hear, your favorite part of the episode, what you had for lunch. I don't know, just come say hello. It really is the best way to spread the word about the podcast and, really get people involved in the adoption and foster care world because there are never enough hands. There is never enough community, and we just like to get the word out as much as we possibly can. I do want to give a big thanks to our podcast editor, Ruben Andrews. And of course, big, huge thank you, David and Michelle. Your story is fantastic. I'm so glad you were here to share it. We really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Alex. Really appreciate you as well.
Alex. It's been really lovely talking about it, and I'm so glad you asked us on. And I just hope that we can help others. And I really hope that your destination of getting people to adopt and foster more children. There's so many children out there that need a loving home, and what better way to broadcast it by listening to real people talk about their stories.
Yeah, it's my favorite part about doing this podcast is just being able to meet other members of this community and encourage, their courageousness to share their stories. And that's definitely what you've done today. So thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Thank you, Alex.
Wonderful. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk soon.
Take care.
Bye, Alex.
Bye-bye.